Sentiamo ora il nostro nuovo ospite, il fotografo Marco Pedde, con cui andremo ad aprire il nuovo segmento sulla mobilitazione a opinione pubblica come mezzo di prevenzione per l'epidemia. Quest'anno, essendo il premiato oltreoceano, il premio è stato consegnato direttamente dall'ambasciatore italiano a Washington, Armando Varricchio. Vediamo insieme il video.
Un caro saluto da Washington agli amici del Premio Res Publica. Oggi è un giorno importante. Ancora una volta questa bellissima organizzazione offre un riconoscimento a chi si è distinto in un campo così importante come quello della ricerca medica. Oggi più che mai è importante dimostrare fiducia nella scienza. Nel momento in cui siamo di fronte tutti, in Italia, in Europa, negli Stati Uniti, di fronte a questa terribile pandemia, è importante avere fiducia in chi ogni giorno, senza colori diversi, senza magliette di squadre, si occupa di portare avanti la ricerca. Ne abbiamo tutti bisogno. Come antipasto rispetto alla giornata odierna, la settimana scorsa qui a Washington abbiamo offerto un riconoscimento ad una figura che è diventata famosa non soltanto negli Stati Uniti, ma in tutto il mondo, il dottor Anthony Fauci. Una figura di altissimo livello, uno scienziato che gode di un prestigio unanime e che nel corso degli anni si è distinto per battaglie nei confronti di malattie che abbiamo imparato a conoscere, dalla HIV/AIDS alla febbre suina, ad altre patologie che hanno segnato l'epoca in cui viviamo. Oggi il dottor Fauci è in prima linea per combattere il Covid-19. Abbiamo voluto dimostrare, ospitandolo qui nella residenza d'Italia a Villa Firenze a Washington, come il nostro Paese voglia dimostrare ancora una volta affetto e riconoscenza nei suoi confronti. Il dottor Fauci è certamente una figura di altissimo prestigio, ma non è solo. Negli Stati Uniti operano tantissimi scienziati e ricercatori italiani. Soltanto qui a Washington, nella sede di questa grande organizzazione che riunisce la scienza e la ricerca medica nei settori più avanzati, operano in questo momento 200 ricercatori italiani. Sono la punta di diamante del nostro sistema. Le loro ricerche, che poi torneranno in Italia assicurando un naturale collegamento tra le due sponde dell'Atlantico, contribuiranno a far avanzare quello che noi tutti riteniamo sia un obiettivo comune: portare avanti l'impegno per fronteggiare la pandemia. Oggi è un giorno importante e consentitemi anche di esprimere un ringraziamento agli organizzatori. Res Publica, nel suo nome, vuole significare l'impegno civico, l'impegno a favore della comunità. Sono valori che certamente sono importanti nella bellissima Mondovì, nel nostro amato paese, ma che sono importanti anche qui negli Stati Uniti. Da Washington un caro saluto a tutti.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, you are a man extraordinarily committed to the common good, with a keen sense of civic responsibility. A talented physician, scientist, educator, and administrator, you are an advisor to government, a guardian of public health, and an advocate of shared values. The Res Publica jury is pleased to award to you the 2020 Res Publica Award. Indeed, you are the incarnation of the Res Publica founding principles. Awards this year go to people and institutions committed to fighting the pandemic. You are not only doing this, but several years ago actually anticipated the need to prepare against this terrible event. In 2017, in a speech at Georgetown University, you voiced fears of an infectious pathogen that could threaten humanity. You spoke humbly and resolutely, and I quote, "I don't know where or when, but I'm sure it will happen." This foresight reflects your ability to set up an argument supported by evidence and to communicate it with resolve with no adversarial posturing. Your intellectual training and clarity of thought make you a great communicator, providing realistic and reassuring advice. Advice that is respected because you are informed. Advice that is trusted because you are honest. Knowledge and honesty are the two requisites for today's civic mobilization against the pandemic. Mobilizing public opinion is difficult in a world suspicious of expertise and authorities, where sound bites often get more attention than sound advice and wise policy. In this tough environment, the Res Publica jury is especially attentive to your encouragement of young people to turn into fighters rather than purveyors of the virus. The jury also admires your views on the COVID-19 vaccine. By pointing out the many manifestations and consequences of the virus, you created a roadmap for the development of its vaccine. This vaccine should be sourced in many countries, available everywhere, and at a reasonable price, so as to protect especially those most vulnerable to the infection. This is your vision, and the jury shares it. In researching different illnesses over the years, you have shown to be interested in more than healing infirmities. You have a broader, society-wide preventative concern to show that infections are not limited to segments of society identified by age, income, or culture. Infections threaten everybody. The reaction must be by everybody, for everybody's benefit. The jury also shares this view. To conclude, Dr. Fauci, your lifelong experience with pandemics has convinced you that the attitude of public health officials toward virus victims must be one of empathy, identifying with those who suffer and organizing whatever has to be done in function of their needs, not in the light of interest of those assisting them. This is another aspect of your professional personality that the Res Publica jury commends. Such an attitude has two important implications. It makes you a public health activist, Dr. Fauci, rather than a conventional scientist. It allows you to develop a relationship with those affected by the virus, gain their confidence, nudge them toward participating in clinical tests and undergoing experimental therapies. This attitude also makes you, Dr. Fauci, a mobilization campaigner rather than an ordinary bureaucrat. Addressing the needs of patients in an inclusive and humanitarian approach is a welcome development in healthcare worldwide. Would you join me at the podium for the presentation of the award? Medical doctor, scientist, public health advocate extraordinaire, humanitarian, proud son of Italy. Your mother's roots are from Naples, your father's from Sicily. Graduate of the College of the Holy Cross and the Weill Cornell Medical College. Loving husband and proud father, we are honored on behalf of the jury of Res Publica to award you the 2020 Res Publica Prize.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Schmidt, for that very, very kind and generous introduction. Mr. Ambassador and ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's truly a great honor and a privilege to be here with you today. As some of you know, I've been to this beautiful home many, many times over the years. And I always feel a certain connection to it because of the obvious reasons of my Italian background. You had mentioned that Galileo Galilei likely is looking down at us in the sense of science. Well, I can tell you that it is also likely that my grandfather and grandmother are looking down because, as you said very correctly, I am indeed a son of Italy. My grandfather and my grandmother on my father's side, Antonino Fauci and Coligera Fauci, Coligera is a very Sicilian name, as you well know, came over on a boat in the turn of the century, landed at Ellis Island, and then went to the lower portion of Manhattan, referred to as Little Italy, and lived there for a few years before they moved to Brooklyn, New York, where my father was born. Actually, he was born in Little Italy, but they moved there when he was a little boy. My mother's side, from Naples, as you mentioned, my grandmother, whose name was Emilia Trematera, and interestingly, my grandfather had a Swiss name because his family originally was from Switzerland, and his name was Giovanni Abbas. They also, interestingly, at the same time, about a few months apart, also came over and landed on Ellis Island and moved to the same section of New York City called Little Italy. And they didn't know each other there until they both moved to Brooklyn, New York, in the same neighborhood. And that's where my father met my mother in elementary school. They went to the same high school together, and they got married right after graduation from high school when they were 18 years old. So it's a very, I think, charming story. So, you mentioned the idea about COVID-19. You know, there are so many parallels between what went on in Italy and what we suffered here in the United States, because in the very early months, in the late winter, early spring, when the Lombardy area of Italy was so dramatically affected, and then ultimately the entire country of Italy, then very soon thereafter, we had the same explosion of cases in the northeastern part of the country, particularly the New York metropolitan area, which, similar to Lombardy, it went peaked and then came down, and then the rest of the country exploded. Well, right now, even though I very gratefully accept this award of Res Publica, that we have a lot of work ahead of us, because even as I speak right now, yesterday, we had 83,000 cases in the United States, which is the most we've ever had on a single day, even at the very worst part of the outbreak. And if you look at the map of the European Union and Italy and France and Spain and the UK, the same thing is happening there. They're having a resurgence of cases. So we have a challenge ahead of us, and I think it reminds us that this is a global problem that we have to pull together globally, because one area of the world inevitably affects another area of the world. So hopefully, as we enter into this very precarious time of the cooler months of the fall and the colder months of the winter, that in fact we abide by the public health measures that we seem to have been ignoring for so long, both here in the United States and elsewhere. So again, thank you very much for this extraordinary honor. I am very, very pleased and very humbled by it, and I pledge to you that I, at least in my own efforts and those of my colleagues, will not really slow down at all until we get this under control. And as you well know, with the Italy connection, we have so many people in the NIH who are Italian scientists who are also working on this effort, including Christina and Paolo and Patricia and others. As you know, I have trained over the years many Italian scientists, and even now as I speak, they are battling COVID-19 in cities like Milano and Venice and places like that. So again, thank you very much. I appreciated it. Have a good day. Thank you.